How should the Springboks line up for the first test against Australia in the Rugby Championship? Now, there's a lot riding on this test because the Springboks don't have a great record going down to Australia. Since 1996, the Springboks have only secured 5 wins down under in Australia, and we've only won 1 out of the last 5 games in Australia. So the pressure is definitely on to get the selection right, to get the game plan right, and to win this game against Australia. As always, let me know your guys' thoughts down in the comments. I do try to get back to as many comments as I can. If you haven't, please make sure you absolutely mur that subscribe button, because we are trying to interview Rassie Erasmus and Siya Kolisi on this channel by the end of the year, and we need your guys' support to do it. Still about 85% of you guys that watch this channel on a regular basis are not subscribed, so please mur that subscribe button, leave this video a like, and let's get into my Springbok lineup to face Australia. Now, there are going to be a couple of talking points on this team. Are players fit? As I know, all 33 players are fit. We weren't sure about Pieter-Steph du Toit, but Rassie Erasmus in a press conference said yesterday that he should be good. Malcolm Marx is about 90% of the way there and is expected to be fit for that first test against Australia. So we're going to go on the presumption that all 33 players are fit to play for the Springboks. So starting with the front row, look, I think the front row sort of picks itself, especially in a big test match like this. It's going to be interesting to see how Rassie Erasmus goes about playing experience, but also giving the younger guys a couple of caps and building that experience for them in a rugby championship game. So starting in that number 1 jersey, I think Ox has to start. He had a decent season, a decent series against Ireland, especially in that second test. So I think Ox will start. Hooker, we got a couple of options. Johan Grobler, who is, Rassie has said, is our third choice hooker at the moment. Bongi Mbonambe and Malcolm Marx. Now, I do think Malcolm Marx is better coming off the bench than Bongi Mbonambe, and I think Bongi is a better starter than Malcolm Marx. So for that reasoning, I'm going to go for Bongi Mbonambe to start in that number 2 jersey. Then in the number 3 jersey, we got Vincent Koch, Frans Malherbe, and Gerrit Steenkamp. Now, Vincent Koch and Frans Malherbe are pretty interchangeable. Gerrit Steenkamp, it is going to be interesting to see where Rassie Erasmus plays him within the Rugby Championship. Is he going to get a couple of caps against Argentina? Will we see him come off the bench against Australia? For me, I'm going to stick with the diesel tractor, Frans Malherbe, in that number 3 position. Then moving into the locks. Now, this is an interesting position because depending on what split Rassie Erasmus goes for is going to determine who starts and who doesn't. So for me, at number 4, you have to put Eben Etzebeth there. He's always going to be starter. And I do think Rassie Erasmus will look to play him for sort of 80 minutes in this first Australian test. Then it's who do we partner Eben Etzebeth up with? Argeus Snyman, Salman Murat, or Ruan Nokia? Now, Ruan Nokia, I do think had a very, very good season for the Bulls and will get a couple of caps within the Rugby Championship. Whether he comes off the bench here or starts, he probably isn't going to start, and I would be very surprised to see him coming off of the bench. Salman Murat, Argeus Snyman, who are we going to start in that number 5 jersey? Look, Rassie Erasmus does favor Salman Murat. I do think Argeus Snyman is a good player to have coming off the bench. He does provide that impact into the game, and he can sort of, one of those guys who can change the game a little bit. But I'm going to pair Eben Etzebeth with Argeus Snyman. I think that's, at the moment, our best lock combination. Obviously, we have so many guys injured. Jean Klein, Loet de Jager, Franco Mostert, that would normally play in that number 5 jersey. But I think Argeus Snyman and Eben Etzebeth starting against Australia in a very important test against Australia is the right way to go. We then move over into the loose forwards. Now, I do think it's, again, dependent on the split, but in that number 6 jersey, Siya Kolisi will start. He will captain the Springboks, and I did think he had a very, very good series against Ireland. Now we just got to decide who's playing 7, who's playing 8. Pieter-Steph du Toit will obviously play 7 if he's fit, and it sounds like he is fit. So we got Siya at 6, Pieter-Steph du Toit at 7, and then 8. We need to discuss a bit because we've got Kwagga Smith and we have Ulrich Loh. Now, I do think if Evan Roos was picked alongside Kwagga Smith, then Evan Roos would start this test match against Australia. I think we need to keep that same energy. I think Kwagga Smith provides us a lot of utility coming off of the bench. He can play 8, he can play 6, he can play 7, he can play wing if we need him to play wing. So I think Ulrich Loh getting a start against Australia is a very, very good call because, yes, he had a good game against Portugal, and yes, it was against Portugal, but I do think we need to give Ulrich Loh some experience, and having Kwagga Smith coming off the bench as that utility forward is very, very powerful. So for me, I'm going to start Ulrich Loh, and that finishes off our pack of forwards. Let's get into the back line where there's a couple more decisions to be made, a couple of very interesting decisions to be made. Now, in that scrum of position at number 9, we have Kobus Reinach, we have Grant Williams, or we have Morne van den Berg. Now, off the bat, I don't think Morne van den Berg is going to get a start against Australia in this first test. I don't even know if he's going to be on the bench. So we have to decide between Kobus Reinach and Grant Williams. For me, at the moment, out of those three, I would say that our best scrum off is Grant Williams at the moment, with Kobus Reinach right behind him. I think Grant deserves a big start against Australia. He's been phenomenal. We know how good his box kicking is. He's extremely fast, and he's one of those guys that can impact the game, and he's a game changer. He has that X factor. So for me, I'm going to start Grant Williams. Kobus Reinach will probably come off the bench for me, but then into that fly-off position that's going to pair with Grant Williams. This is a massive, massive call because we have Sasha, we have Manie Lebok, and we have Handré Pollard. Now, I don't think Manie is in the running for this first Australian test just because of his performances lately. I think it's going to be either one of Handré Pollard or Sasha Fainbu-Ngumazulu starting this test against Australia. I would personally love Sasha to start. I think he's got 4 caps under his belt now. He's performed 4 or 5 caps. He's performed very, very well for the Springboks. He looks like he belongs there and he deserves to be there. So starting Sasha against Australia, I don't think is a bad call at all. We saw how he came on for Manie Lebok in that Portugal test match and he lit the place on fire. Do I think Rassie's going to go for Sasha? Probably not, and for one reason only, because he is our best utility back when you look at all the backs that have been included in this lineup. I think if Damian Willemse was there, we might be having a little bit of a different conversation, but Sasha is just so good in that number 23 jersey where he can come on at 10, at 12, at fullback, at wing. He is just that guy who can sort of play every position. So for that reason, I'm going to go Grant Williams at 9, Handré Pollard at 10, and then with Sasha coming off of the bench. Then let's dive into the wings. Now we only have 3 wings that we can potentially choose from, maybe 4 if you include Apelele Fassi. But we've got Cheslin Colby, we've got Makazole Mapimpi, and we have Kurtley Arendse. I think this one's pretty stamped on. Cheslin Colby and Kurtley Arendse will start for me. Makazole Mapimpi, again, doesn't have a bad game in a Springbok jersey, and I do think he will start a couple of test matches in the Rugby Championship. But again, it's very vital that we win these test matches against Australia down under, just so that we can prove to ourselves that we can do it. It'll do wonders for the momentum of this team, the psyche of this team, especially going into that New Zealand double header in South Africa. So Cheslin and Kurtley get the wingers jerseys for me. Then into the center pairings, I'm going to go, there's only 3 we can really choose from: Damien Delende, Lukhanyo or Jesse Kriel. I thought Lukhanyo had a phenomenal game against Portugal. Down to 14 men, he really controlled that number 12 and 13 channel extremely well. And Rassie said in the press conference yesterday that it's quite interesting that Lukhanyo played so well at 12 with Sasha at 10. Maybe he's starting to look at Lukhanyo maybe more of a 12 and not a 13. So that could be very, very interesting. Lukhanyo playing 12 instead of 13 alongside Jesse Kriel. But for me, I think we're going to have to stick with Damien Delende at 12 and Jesse Kriel at 13. We are going to see Lukhanyo in this Rugby Championship against Australia, New Zealand, or Argentina. He is going to start a couple of games either in that number 12 or 13 channel. And then finishing it off with 15 at the back, we got Apelele Fassi or Willie Leroux. I think there's an interesting call to go for Apelele Fassi here, especially because Handré Pollard is playing 10. If Sasha Fainbu-Ngumazulu was playing 10, then there's more of an argument for Willie Leroux to play 15 to sort of counteract that experience at 10 and 15. Do I think Apelele Fassi is going to start here? Probably not. I think again, Rassie wants to go there and win, and he's going to count on his 2 most experienced backline players in that of Handré Pollard and Willie Leroux in that number 15 jersey. We then move over into the bench, and we need to decide what split we're going for here. There is an argument to go for a 5-3 split. There's definitely an argument to go for a 6-2. I don't think we're going to go for a 7-1. For me, I think the best is probably a 6-2, and that's what I've gone for. I think that's what we're going to see, which means that I'm going to have Malcolm Marx at 16. 17, I've gone for an interesting call. I've gone for Jan-Hendrik Wessels, and for a couple of reasons. I think he played well in that Portugal test, and I think there needs to be a couple of younger guys coming through, balanced with the experience of the Springbok side. If you look at who we chose for 1, 2, and 3, Ox, Bongi, Frans Malherbe, World Cup winners. We've got Malcolm Marx at 16. I'm going to put Vincent Koch at 18. So why not experiment a little bit with Jan-Hendrik Wessels in that number 17 jersey, whether he comes on a prop or hooker or wherever you want him to come on. I think giving him an opportunity amongst a very, very experienced pack doesn't hurt Rassie Erasmus much. So I've got Malcolm Marx, Jan-Hendrik Wessels, and Vincent Koch. And then for number 19, we can go Salman Murat or we can go Ruan Nokia. Now, I would love to see Ruan Nokia come off the bench in this Australia test, but we have seen that Rassie has sort of backed Salman Murat and sees him as a future captain of the Springboks. I'm not convinced yet with his performances on the field, but I do think he's probably going to be the lock to come off the bench. So I'll put Salman Murat there in the number 19 jersey. Then who do we go with for the 2 last forward spots? Do we go with another lock in Ruan Nokia, or do we go for 2 loosies? Now, I'll tell you why I'm going for 2 loosies, because Pieter-Steph du Toit can also slot into that lock position. So he does free that up a bit. Ulrich Loh could also slot into that lock position. So I don't think we need to have 2 locks on the bench. So for me, I'm not going to go with Ben Jason Dixon, just because I think he is a carbon copy of Pieter-Steph du Toit, and I think it's either Pieter-Steph or Ben Jason Dixon in the same side. I could be completely wrong, but that's the vibe I'm getting. So I'm going to go Marco van Staden and Kwagga Smith. Now, Marco van Staden will probably come on for Sia at 6. Pieter-Steph is going to be needed to play 80 minutes because he's either going to stay at 7 or slot into a lock position. So Marco van Staden will probably come on for Sia at that number 6 position, and then Kwagga Smith is that utility forward that we can use at 8, 6, or 7. So I think that's a very balanced bench of forwards with a lot of experience, and you've got Jan-Hendrik Wessels coming in, you've got Ulrich Loh starting, so a couple of inexperienced guys amongst the experienced guys. And then the 2 backs finishing it off, Kobus Reinach and Sasha Fanboom Ngomazulu. I've already explained why I want them there. Kobus Reinach can play 9. He can also slot in at wing. Sasha Fanboom Ngomazulu just provides us so much cover in that back line. So that's how I see the Springboks lining up against Australia. That's what I would like to see. Let me know again down in the comments what you guys would like to see from Rassie Erasmus against Australia. If you haven't, please absolutely mur that subscribe button. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take it easy. Peace.